In this tutorial, we're going to go over materials and UV map coordinates. So to start off, I'm going to go and explain material IDs and UVW IDs, map channel IDs. So to start off, we're going to start off with a cube. Doesn't really matter the dimensions, we're just going to show you how you can apply different materials to each side of this cube. So for starters, let's go ahead over to the material editor by hitting M on the keyboard. It's going to bring up my slate material editor. You are used to using the compact material editor, so I'll switch to that for now. And I will start off by making a multi-sub-object material. So we're going to go under where it says standard to change the type of the material. It's going to open up the material map browser, and we're going to go ahead and go to standard under materials. Make sure you're under materials. And we're going to go and use a multi-sub object. It's going to ask you if you want to replace the material. It doesn't matter which option you choose because we are creating a brand new material and there are no pre-existing materials here except for the default standard. So I'm just going to hit OK. Now, if I look at this cube, there are exactly 6 sides. You have front, left, right, back, top, and bottom. So 6 sides total. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my number here to 6. I'm going to hit OK. And then I'm going to change all of these to make sure they match up. So what you can do is copy the standard material by simply clicking and dragging, letting go on this, hit copy, OK, copy, OK. Do all of this. You're going to do this all the way down, and you want to make sure you're hitting copy and not instance, because we're making a brand new material for each one of these. So all of these are going to be a standard material, like so. And now what we want to do is apply this multi-sub object to this cube here. But before we do that, we want to make sure that all of our material IDs are set to one number. To do that, we're going to first convert this to an editable poly. Now you can do this 2 different ways. You can either initially convert to editable poly, or you can drop an edit poly modifier on top of it. It does not matter which one you do. An edit poly modifier is a non-destructive way of doing it, so you can always go back to the box parameters, the original parameters here. And if you choose to convert to editable poly, you can just collapse 2 and it'll go to editable poly. So I'm going to go into Polygon and I'm just going to do a selection around everything to make sure I have all sides selected, like so. And then I'm going to scroll down to Polygon Material IDs right here. Now I want you to notice these 2 input boxes here. Right now they're blank. But if I select off of it and select one of these, notice that it puts a number in here. I want you to notice that each side has an ID assigned to it. So by default, when you make a box, it already assigns material IDs to each side. So right now, there are 6 sides here. So I don't even have to go in and actually assign them because they're already done. So we're going to skip that step, and we're going to go ahead and drag and drop this onto the box. So now we have different material IDs here, but now we want to change the color so we can actually see what's going on here. So I'm going to put in some information here. Let's make the first color red, the second color green, blue, go with the yellow, and let's go for magenta. So each side of the box has a different color assigned to it. Now all of these have IDs are different. Now I want you to pay attention to this column right here where it says name. I'm actually going to go through and name all of these. Green, blue, yellow, magenta, and we'll just leave this as gray. Now these names right here are going to correspond to the actual polygon material IDs over here. So if I were to go over here, you notice that all the names are actually populated in this list now. So if I were to go to select ID, if I want to select ID 1, hit select ID, it's going to select the first ID, which is the top, which is red. If I go to select ID 2, hit select, it's going to select the bottom here, which is green. So all of these are corresponding to each side of this cube here. So now we want to go through and do a little bit more, and we want to assign some actual materials to this. So right now we just assigned solid colors, but let's say we want to do a little bit more than that. Let's say we want to add some actual materials onto this this side here, like a brick texture or a wood texture, for instance. So let's say for the top texture, we want something like a brick texture. So what I would do is go over to the standard material, and I'm going to go to the diffuse slot, and it's going to bring up my material map browser. I'm going to look for standard maps. I'm going to look for a bitmap, and it's going to take me to my browse, and I'm going to look for some images. And the images I am looking for are going to be some images like this. This will work out. So let's say I want to put this window texture on it. Click on that. Tell it to show shaded material in viewport. And voila, you can see that it's actually showing up there. But now let's say I want to fine tune this. I want to change the way the tiling is. Now you can do this in here with tiling here. Let's say if I want to go through here and tile this like that, tile it here. You can do it inside of the actual bitmap parameter box, but let's say that I want to put this same bitmap on a different side, but use a different tiling. Now, you can do that as well. So let's say I copy this, and I'm going to go to a completely different side. Let's say the green. Let's do gray since it's right beside it. So I'll go to gray, go to diffuse, and I'm going to paste this. So now we see that this texture continues on. Now if I go in here and I start change the tiling, you notice that it changes for this channel right here. So now I can get a different tiling effect here just by using this. I can change this to mirrored or tile, and you'll get sort of a different result for each one. But let's say that I want to fine tune this even more. I want direct control over everything. Let's use another box for this instance. Now what I want to do is I want to take this material here and copy it to another channel, and I want to make a copy, not an instance, because I'm going to make some changes to this. And I'm just going to drag and drop it on this box. It's going to ask me if I want to replace it because I did not change the original name. So what I want to do is rename this to something else. Let's just call this Windows. Make sure it's applied. And now something's freezing up. Give it a minute. Something's not right here. So sometimes you'll run into problems like this. 3ds Max is pretty buggy, and my application just crashed, so I'm going to have to restart. So I'm just going to quickly restart this. Now, the reason my application probably crashed is because I had the scenes. I had a lot of scenes open prior to this, and I was just going through them, resetting the scene. Sometimes that causes issues to compact on top of each other, and you'll get different effects. Um, so sometimes having Max open for too long will cause crashes, because all I literally did was apply a material and it crashed. That's it. So let's try that again. Going to make a cube. Going to go to Material Editor, and I'm just going to drop the material on it. I'm going to go grab a bitmap out of here, go to Standard Maps, bitmap, and I'm actually going to look into a different location for my actual bitmaps here. What I want to do is I want to use, let's say, a brick texture. So I'm going to insert my flash drive I have here, because I actually have some textures on here. I'm going to scroll to that location. Alright, so now I have some brick textures in here. Now I want you to pay attention to different types of maps I have in here. Now I'm going to use this cobblestone diffuse.jpg. So when I put it on this box here, you see that it applies to all sides and it's pretty uniform. But what if I want to control this directly? How would I do that? Well, the way I would do that is through UVW Map. So I have my layouts configured right here where I can just click on UVW Map and it applies to my object. But I'm going to show you where you can find it on the modifier list. You can go to the drop down list, go all the way to the bottom, and you'll see UVW Map here. So as you can see, once I did that, it kind of changed the way the UVs are going across the actual images stretch now, because I have a planar projection, which means it's being projected along the z-axis which is up and down. So that means that the top and the bottom are going to show up correctly, but the sides will not. So instead, what I have to do is do a box projection. So now you see the difference here. And now, once I do that, I can go through and change the tiling of this. Let's say if I want to double this, so 2 by 2. So now that my cobblestones are a lot smaller now, just going to put that back to 1. So the first type of map we just used was a diffuse map. So it's just an image or a flat. It can be an image or a flat color. The next type of map we're going to use is a bump map. And what a bump map is going to do is it's going to simulate detail. So I'm going to click here and I'm going to use standard normal bump. And now right here, it gives you 2 parameters here. You have normal and additional bump. We're going to use normal because we want to input a normal map. So I'm going to click on that, go to map standard and then bitmap. And now we're going to find a normal map. So this cobblestone has a normal map. Now, when I put this normal map on, you can't really see anything in the viewport. It doesn't really show you what's going on here. And the reason for that is because I have my show shaded material on regular mode. I need to put it on hardware mode. So in order to do that, I need to click and hold on this button here, scroll over to the right, and you'll see this blue and white checker box. I need to select that one. So now it's going to go process, and now you can see that there's a little bit more detail on the map here. It's starting to simulate a little bit more detail. So if I go here and I change the bump amount, let's say if I put it on 100, you see that it changes the way this looks. And what this is doing is it's actually simulating detail, and it's adding extra information to the texture here. So if we go in really close and I turn the bump off, you see that some of that detail goes away. Turn it back on, comes back. Now, in order to really see this effect, you have to actually put a light on it. So I'm going to go to standard, and I'm going to drop a mental ray Omni light in here. And I want you to notice what this is actually doing. So this is with the bump on. If I turn it off, this is what it looks like. Notice that the detail isn't there anymore, and it looks kind of flat. It looks like a flat surface. But if I turn on the bump, it actually adds more detail and depth to the surface. And wait for the light to update again. Sometimes you have to wait. All right, there it is. So now we're getting a little bit more detail being stimulated in here. So as you can see, as I move the light, it's giving the illusion that the bricks have depth to them. So it's adding a little bit more detail in here, which is really cool. So another way you can add detail is through a displacement or height map. And in order to do that, let's turn this light off. Or I can just go here, and I'm going to switch to default lighting instead of scene lighting, so it'll make that light irrelevant. And I'm going to add a displacement map to this box here, because I'm going to use an image to try to pull out the bricks. I'm going to scroll down and go to displacement, and I'm going to look for image bitmap. Now I want to scroll back to that location, and I'm going to use this texture here. And I'm going to change the strength to something like 5. Turn on Luminance Center, and use existing mapping. So with all of those checked, I should now see some extra detail, but nothing is actually happening. Now the reason for that is I don't have enough information in this box to actually display this texture. And what I mean by that is I have no segments. So if I were to go here and let's say put in 20 by 20 by 20, you notice that the surface of this box is starting to deform a little bit. Turn off edge faces. Now look at what's happening here. The box is starting to deform now. It's starting to take on a different shape. But I still don't have enough information in here, so I need to increase this just a little bit more. So a faster way to do this is to apply a Turbosmooth Modifier. So what that is going to do is it's going to multiply your geometry by 4. So I'm going to go and change my display properties here. I'm going to my progressive display, right click on it to get to the viewport configuration. And I'm going to go to visual style and appearance. And I want to turn off display selected with edge faces. So now I don't get this edge faces around the wireframe. So now as you can see, the brick is actually coming off of the surface here. If I increase the iterations just by 1, it's going to get a little bit more detailed here. Now you want to be careful with this Turbosmooth. The more and more you add iterations on this, the slower your viewport is going to run, depending on what kind of video card you're running. Now this bump is a little bit too high, so I'm going to drop this down to something like 2, just so it's a little bit more reasonable. And let's go back and turn this light on now. So I'm going to go back to lighting and shadows and illuminate with scene lights. So now when I go across this surface, you can now see that this actually has some depth in between the crevices of the bricks. Especially if I put the light up top here, you can see that there's a shadow right here inside the creases. So this brick texture now has actually been raised off of the surface. So this is what a displacement map does. So displacement on, off, on, off. It's pretty much night and day. So displacement maps are very useful, but they can be very taxing on your hardware. So depending on what kind of hardware you're running, you'll get different results. So let's say I want to make these bricks shiny, like it's been raining outside. The way I would do that is I would change the specularity. So right here I have specular color, which is usually generally set to white, which is a little bit more realistic. And right down below on the specular highlights, I want to change this value up a little bit, and you'll see that my bricks actually get a little bit shinier. So as I increase that, it will get really, really bright. You don't want it too bright. So when I go across this surface, you'll see that the bricks actually look shiny. Now I want to change the glossiness, so I'm going to increase this a little bit. So now it'll start to ease out some of that specularity. So now you're starting to get a hint of it, but not so much. So something like that. So now if I scroll across the lights here, you can see that the bricks actually look very shiny. So that's what your specular is going to do. So a combination of specular and glossiness. Glossiness changes the size of the highlight. So if I will put this on 0, you see it pretty much blows it out. But if I were to decrease this, well, increase the amount, it's going to tune down the specularity of it. It's going to fine tune the highlight of it. So that's a really cool effect, very useful. So we have raised wet bricks. Let's also go back and turn on the bump map here. So in combination with the height map, add the bump map to it. It's going to add a little bit, it's going to add a lot more detail to it. So now it looks a little bit weird. So we might have to tone the bump down a tad. So let's say 50%. And wait till that recalculates and it'll reapply the light. There we go. So now when we scroll across the bricks here, you'll see that we're starting to get a little glitter effect. It's starting to glisten. So you're getting really different effects with the lighting and with the textures. And this is all with just a cube. So food for thought, there's also a displacement channel here inside of the material. I recommend not using this because this is going to jump your render times and you can't see this in the viewport. This is only for render only. So you get a better preview if you actually apply a displacement modifier on top of the modifier list on the actual object. So you just got to be careful with that. So let's check out the reflection. So we can also make this reflective. So if I turn on reflectiveness, what it's going to do is it's actually going to reflect whatever is in the environment. Now, it's going to be really hard to see this in the actual viewport here, but you will have to see it in the render itself. So let's go check out the render setup. I have my renderer set to mental ray, and that's what I want to use. I have global illumination on, so all of my settings are okay. So I'm just going to do a quick test render just to see what this looks like. So there you go. Pretty cool brick pattern. Let's say I want to make a mirror. I'm going to make a plane here, and this is going to serve as my mirror. And I'm just going to put it right here. Something like that. And I'm going to make a new material and drop it there. So next slot, I'm going to go to standard. And I'm going to turn this into an arc and design material. So this is kind of a standard mineral ray material. And I want to turn my reflectivity all the way up. So if I go in here, double click to actually enlarge this, and I turn on the checker background, you can see what this is doing here. As I increase the reflectivity, it reflects everything. If I turn this off, I go back down to 0, it doesn't reflect anything. So what should happen when I render out is it should be a mirror, and you should see the bricks inside of this actual plane here. And there we go. We have a reflection of the bricks here. So that's a really fast way to make a mirror. So you scroll down here, you have some other parameters in here. You have your roughness, which is going to be the surface, how the surface breaks up light. You have your metal material, and anytime you roll over certain options, let's say if I roll over these will tell you exactly what they do. These are little tool tips here. So I encourage you to kind of go and explore and see what things are. So I'm going to show you some translucent materials or transparent materials. I'm going to go opacity. So let's use a different map here, and I'm going to draw out another plane here. And I'm going to make this vertical 90 degrees. And I'm just going to kind of put it right in front of the bricks here. And I'm going to put an opacity map on top of this. So for that, standard material, doesn't matter. And what I want to do is I want to change this opacity to a map. So click on the little box here, go to standard bitmap, and let's find an opacity map. Let's say I want to make a fence. So now what I did here is I put this map in the opacity channel, and look what it's doing. So if I go take a look at this map here, oh, wrong button, view image, you see that it's a white and black texture. So whatever's black is going to be completely transparent. Whatever's white is going to be opaque, which is visible. So this is why you're getting this texture right here. And you can see that that actually affects the lighting itself. So if I pull back on this a little bit, just this here, this little plane, you can see that in the back behind it, the light is actually casting a shadow through this. Wait for it to update. There we go. You can see as I move this around, the light is actually affecting the shadow based on this opacity map. So I can go in here and change the color a little bit. And it's only going to affect what you can see based on the map. And now I can go through and actually tile this again. So if I were to go through and drop a UVW map on this, and I'm going to increase the tiling, let's say 3 by 3. Take a look at what that's doing. You get a really cool effect here. So opacity maps are very useful. You can use this to make a fence pretty much. This is a really quick and easy way of making a fence using just a texture. Now the only thing is when you're using this, you can see that it's pretty much flat. It's simulated detail. It's not actually there. But you can use a shell modifier to kind of simulate the detail. So if I were to drop a shell on this, you can see that it increases the thickness a bit, but it kind of looks like it's double-sided. So that's one way of kind of simulating some thickness. Now, a lot of games use opacity textures to get certain effects. So a lot of foliage or grass and trees in games, they're all opacity maps. So next up, let's say I want to actually create a material library. Let's say that I have made a bunch of materials that I like and I want to save these out and use these at a later date. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to name all of these. I'm going to name this brick, name this mirror, and name this fence. So these are all materials that I actually want to use. So the way you would do this is you would go into Get Material to open your material map browser, and you'll click on this little down arrow that's right in the top left. Kind of looks like an eject button. And what I want to do is not open, but I want to create a new material library. And I'm just going to call this test lib for a library. I'm just going to hit enter. And now what this does is it adds an extra category right here. Now there's nothing in it right now. We actually have to assign these materials to this. So I'm going to go into scene materials, or sample slots. So your sample slots are pretty much what's mirrored right here. And if I right click on this, I have the option to copy to test underscore lib. Right click, copy to test underscore lib. And same with this one, copy to test underscore lib. And when I go back to this list, you see that they've actually been populated in this little material library. Now I want you to notice here, right here, there's a little asterisk right in front of the name here. That means that this library has not been saved. So if you were to close this file, you would lose this. So you need to right click and go to save. And now the asterisk goes away and this little library is actually saved out now. So let's test this out. I'm just going to reset this scene. I'm not going to save anything. So we got a brand new scene here. I'm going to drop a box up here. I'm going to use a plane. Gonna rotate this up, use another plane. So that'll be our fence. Let's make that an even 90 degrees. So we're gonna go back and find all of our materials. So hit M on the keyboard, open the material library. And now I want to import my library. Now, the cool thing about this is once you save a library, it's going to be stored into your material list. So right here, you see it's already here. So what I can do is I can just grab this brick texture, grab this mirror, grab this fence, put it all back into my sample slots. And now I can just reapply all my materials like so. Reapply my material, reapply my fence. So now I got my materials back. Now, of course, the object UVW coordinates are not going to transfer because that's based on the actual object itself. So I would just have to go back and reapply this UVW map right onto this. But as you can see, you can save out your own material library. Once you find some materials that you like, once you make them, you don't have to keep making them. You can just save them and you can edit them on the fly. And let's say I want to go through here and I want to make some changes. Let's say I want to change the specular color to something like red. So when I actually put my light in here, see what it looks like. Use a mental ray Omni. You notice that there's red highlights on the bricks instead of white. Let's say I want to tone down that bitmap for the normal. I put it down to like 10. Wait for the material to update. So now this is what we're getting here. You'll see that you get a red highlight instead of a white highlight. You see on the mirror below, there's a white highlight. Now, there's something to note that inside of 3ds Max, you're not going to get real-time reflections. This is a rendered effect. So now if I put this back over top of that, getting some different effects here. So now let's go back to my material library. Now if I want to save this, I'll just have to copy it back to here. And you notice that it put a new material in here. It didn't update this material. So what I can do is I can just remove this one and keep the new one. And now I can update this, save it. So now this is saved. So this is a cool way you can go through and make new materials and save them out and just keep editing them. Now one more parameter I want to go over is the self-illumination. So if I go take something like a sphere, let's say I want to use this as the light source. I want to make this sphere glow white. So what I can do is I'm going to add a new material, make it an arc and design material from under mental ray. I'm going to scroll all the way down to self-illumination. Check that. You see that material becomes white. So that means that the actual light is illuminated. Now let's switch this up a little bit. Let's say I want to make a self-illuminated texture, and I want to use this for this plane here. I'm going to make a different one. I'm going to go ahead and change this texture here. So I'm going to make a new material. This time I'm going to use a standard material. Go to diffuse, bitmap. I'm going to use this little flame here. So apply that. So I have an image of the flame. So what's actually going on here? Let's actually render this out. So this is the effect I'm getting. You can see that this is really, really bright. This is actually dull here. And you can see that you can see the outline of the actual plane here. So I want to alpha that out. So what I can do is copy the bitmap that I used to diffuse and actually paste it in the alpha channel as well. So I'm just going to paste it as an instance because I'm not going to make changes to it. And now I'm starting to get a different effect here. Run this out again. So now we see that the alpha is actually taken into effect. So now the box is actually gone here, but my image looks really, really dull and faded. So what I want to do is I want to turn on self-illumination, and I'm also going to take this map here and copy it or instance it in here. Now you can see right here that this actually got a little bit brighter. So let's actually see what it looks like in the render now. Ah, look at that. So now you actually have a little flame here, and it's actually self-illuminated. So that's what self-illumination does. It makes objects a lot brighter, so it'll simulate that it is a light source. So let's simulate realistic in the viewport. There we go. So now we can see what this is actually looking like in the viewport. So if I were to go and make a little candle, this is how I would use it. So usually in a game, you would have something to this nature, and you would have it turned on both sides. So two-sided on, so to show both sides. So no matter which direction you look at it, you'll see that there's a plane there. So, like so. And of course, you can animate this. You can make an animated texture. You can make a little video clip of flame and put it in here. So there's different effects that you can get with this. So let's actually go and see if we can do that. So you have a lot of materials in here that you can use, especially for your projects. I want you to take a look at the mental ray materials. So scroll down the list here. So I'm going to close this. I want you to focus under the material section, under mental ray. Scroll down here. The default you have is the Arc and Design, but you have standard materials for hardwood, for like flooring and furniture. You have glazing, you have concrete, you have masonry, you have metal, you have metallic paint, you have vinyl, you have a default mirror, you have water. So all of these are some preset materials that you can use to actually populate your projects. Now, further down here, I want you to take a look at this Autodesk Material Library. There's a ton of materials in here. Look at all of these categories. So you will definitely find what you're looking for here. So let's say if I go under paint, there's even different types of paint in here. If I go under plastic, there's a bunch of different plastics here. You have transparent, you have textured, you have smooth, you have LED, all of this stuff in here. If I go under wood, you have all of this, and then even under this you have paneled wood. So you have a lot of trees in here with a bunch of materials in here. So you have pretty much everything you need for your actual materials. So in the next lesson, we're going to go over how to apply this to your project 3.